Sara Blakely's financial advisor told her she was making a huge mistake. She took a calculated risk anyway and became a billionaire. I followed traditional advice for 8 years and stayed stuck in the middle class. I discovered that some of the richest people on earth broke every single rule I was taught. Today, I'm exposing 5 money myths that keep most people financially trapped. I spent almost a decade following everything by the book. Diversify everything, massive emergency fund, buy a house ASAP. I stayed financially stable but never truly wealthy. Then I studied how ultra-successful people actually handle money, and they weren't just breaking traditional rules. They were doing it strategically. There's safe advice for building steady wealth and aggressive advice for building extraordinary wealth. The ultra-wealthy focus on asymmetric risk, situations where potential upside far exceeds potential downside. Critical disclaimer: for every billionaire who broke these rules and succeeded, thousands failed miserably. This isn't advice for everyone. It's alternative approaches that work for some people under specific circumstances. You must understand your risk tolerance before considering any of this. But stick around, because I'll tell you about the moment my father asked me one question that made me realize I'd been thinking about money completely backwards my entire life. Always diversify your investments. Every financial advisor will tell you the same thing. Spread your money across different asset classes. One investment tanks, others pick up the slack. It's mathematically proven to reduce risk and give you steady returns. And look, for most people, this works perfectly. Diversification does exactly what it says on the tin. Steady, predictable returns with way less volatility. Building wealth for retirement, the traditional way, diversification is absolutely your best friend. But here's where it gets interesting for serious wealth builders: the concentration advantage. Sara Blakely had $5,000 sitting in her bank account, every penny she owned. Traditional wisdom? Spread that across some index funds, maybe a few blue chips. Play it safe. Instead, she dumped it all into developing Spanx. Her financial advisor probably wanted to shake her. But here's the thing, she had some serious advantages working for her. She was young, could bounce back from failure. She lived and breathed the problem she was solving as a woman, fed up with existing options. And she'd done the math. Worst case, she loses $5,000. Best case, the sky's the limit. Today, Spanx is worth over $1 billion. Here's a story that'll blow your mind about the most expensive financial decision in sports history. Michael Jordan, 1984. He's got 2 shoe deals on the table. Adidas comes in with more cash up front, guaranteed money, the safe play every advisor would recommend. Nike, they offered less cash but threw in something crazy: equity in his own shoe line that didn't even exist yet. Everyone told Jordan to take the Adidas deal. His agent pushed for it. His parents wanted the security. But Jordan, he bet everything on Nike's unproven Air Jordan concept. That concentrated bet has made Jordan over $1.7 billion to date, more than his entire NBA career earnings. In 2023 alone, he made $256 million just from Nike royalties. Think about that. More in 1 year from shoes than most people will see in multiple lifetimes. If you're thinking about concentration, here's when it might make sense. You have deep expertise in a specific area. You're young with high earning potential to recover from failures. The downside is manageable for your specific situation, and you've identified a genuine market inefficiency or knowledge advantage. But remember, for every Jordan, there are thousands of athletes who bet on the wrong brand and made nothing. The key is having genuine advantages, not just gambling. What's your biggest investment right now? Drop it in the comments. Are you diversified or concentrated? Never mix business with pleasure. Here's what traditional advisors tell you: invest with your head, not your heart. Keep emotions out of it. Stick to boring, proven investments you understand financially, but don't really care about. And they've got a point. Emotional investing, it's a disaster waiting to happen. People chase hot stocks, hold on to losers way too long because they're attached, make impulse buys based on feelings instead of facts. The passion advantage. But here's where it gets interesting. Some of the biggest success stories, they happened because people were emotionally invested in problems they personally lived through. Rihanna created Fenty Beauty because she was sick of not finding foundation for her skin tone. Financial experts said the beauty market was way too crowded. Celebrities should stick to what they know. 4 years later, Fenty was worth $1.7 billion. Ryan Reynolds bought Aviation Gin because he genuinely loved the product and had ideas for marketing it. Traditional wisdom said, actors don't understand the spirits business. He sold it 3 years later for $610 million. The critical success factors. But here's what separates successful passion investors from failures. They combine emotional investment with rigorous business discipline. They don't just follow their hearts, they validate their assumptions, study their markets, and plan their execution methodically. Rihanna didn't just create makeup she personally liked. She identified a massive underserved market and executed with Kendo Beauty's retail expertise. Reynolds didn't just buy a gin company because he liked gin. He leveraged his personal brand and marketing skills strategically to create genuine value. Why can passion be powerful? You research more thoroughly when you genuinely care about the outcome. You spot opportunities others miss because you actually live the problem. You persist through inevitable challenges because it's personal, not just financial. You have authentic insights that create real competitive advantages. And you can spot fake trends from real ones because you understand the space intimately. Have you ever turned a personal passion into profit? Share your story in the comments below. Always have 6 to 8 months emergency fund. This is the most sacred rule in personal finance. 6 to 8 months of expenses sitting safely in your savings account. It's financial gospel. And honestly, for most people, this is non-negotiable. Got a family? Mortgage? Limited ways to make money? You absolutely need that safety net. The opportunity cost reality. But here's what nobody talks about. The massive cost of keeping all that cash doing absolutely nothing, while inflation eats it alive every single day. Let me break this down for you. $50,000 in a savings account earning 0.5%, while inflation's running at 3%. You're losing $1,250 in buying power every year. Over 10 years, that's over 12 grand, just gone. And that's not even counting what you could have made investing it. That emergency fund sitting there can become a mental barrier that prevents you from taking the calculated risks necessary to build real wealth. The entrepreneur's calculated risk. Brian Chesky had $40,000 saved in 2008, a solid emergency fund by any standard. Instead of keeping it safely in savings, he used most of it to develop Airbnb during the worst financial crisis in decades. Was this financially reckless? From a traditional perspective, absolutely. But Chesky had calculated specific factors. He was young with no dependents, had roommates to share basic expenses, possessed valuable technical skills that made him easily employable, and most importantly, he believed he'd identified a massive market opportunity that required immediate action. Today, Airbnb is worth over $75 billion. Here's an even more surprising story that really drives this point home. In 2010, Kevin Hart was a struggling comedian with about $35,000 in savings, his entire emergency fund that took him years to build. His financial advisor and everyone around him told him to keep it safe while he built his comedy career, slowly through small clubs and traditional channels. Instead, Hart made a decision that everyone thought was insane. He used almost all of that money to fund his own nationwide comedy tour when no major promoters would back him. He rented venues out of his own pocket, hired his own crew, promoted the shows himself, and essentially bet his entire financial future on his ability to sell tickets. That self-funded tour became Laugh at My Pain, which grossed over $15 million and launched Hart into superstardom. Today, he's worth over $200 million and is one of the highest-paid comedians in the world. Hart's crucial insight was that his biggest risk wasn't losing his emergency fund, it was staying unknown forever, while other comedians with less talent but more resources built their careers. Factors that might allow for smaller emergency funds include high-demand skills that make you easily re-employable, multiple income streams or side businesses, young age with long earning runway ahead, access to family support in true emergencies, stable job market in your field, and no dependents relying on your income. Factors that require larger emergency funds include specialized skills with limited job market, single-income household with dependents, health issues, or family medical needs, volatile industry or economic conditions, no family safety net to fall back on, and irregular income patterns. How many months of expenses do you have saved? Comment below. I'm curious about the range in our community. Buy a home ASAP. Rent is throwing money away. The idea that rent is throwing money away is so deeply embedded in our culture that questioning it feels almost un-American. Real estate builds equity, provides tax benefits, protects against inflation, and gives you stability and control. For many people, home ownership is indeed a great wealth-building tool and an important life goal. But this advice assumes everyone's situation, goals, and market conditions are identical, which simply isn't true. The hidden costs of home ownership. When you buy a home, you're not just buying the house. You're signing up for a complete financial ecosystem. Property taxes that increase every year, insurance premiums that fluctuate, maintenance and repairs typically 1 to 3% of home value annually, HOA fees and assessments, massive transaction costs when you move that are 6 to 10% of home value, reduced geographic mobility for career opportunities, and the opportunity cost of your down payment capital. Most importantly, you're locking up a huge amount of capital in a single, illiquid asset that may or may not appreciate faster than other investments. The mobility premium. Mark Cuban was repeatedly pushed by advisors to buy an expensive Dallas home in the 1990s. Instead, he rented and used the money for tech investments. People constantly told him he was throwing money away on rent. Those investments helped make him a billionaire. Serena Williams rented in different cities during her tennis career instead of buying a primary residence. She used what would have been mortgage payments for venture capital investments. Her VC portfolio eventually exceeded her tennis career earnings. The math versus the emotion. So should you rent or buy? Forget the emotions and cultural pressure. Let's talk math. Here's something that might shock you. In tons of markets, renting is actually cheaper than buying when you factor in all those hidden costs. This decision should be about numbers, not feelings, or what your parents think you should do. But even when buying makes financial sense, there's still the question of opportunity cost. That down payment money could potentially generate higher returns in other investments, especially if you have business opportunities or high growth potential. When might renting make more sense? Your career requires or benefits from geographic flexibility. You're building a business that needs capital deployment. Local real estate prices are extremely high relative to rents. You're in a major life transition period. You have access to higher return investment opportunities. You prioritize liquidity and flexibility over stability. When does buying usually make sense? You're settled in a location for at least 5 to 7 years. Local rent-to-buy ratios favor ownership. You have stable income and adequate emergency funds. You want the psychological benefits of ownership. You're not sacrificing higher return business investments. And you've maximized other tax-advantaged investment options. Are you currently renting or own your home? What's driving that decision for you? Let me know in the comments. Never quit your day job without a plan. This advice exists because statistics show most new businesses fail, and financial security is genuinely important. For most people, keeping steady income while building something on the side is absolutely the responsible, smart approach. The logic is sound. Maintain your steady paycheck, build your side business slowly, save up a massive cushion, have a detailed plan. Don't burn bridges. It's safe, logical, and reduces risk. But there's a psychological dynamic that traditional advice doesn't account for, and it might be the biggest wealth killer of all, the comfort zone trap. When you have that steady paycheck coming in, it removes the urgency and hunger that drives breakthrough performance. You can afford to work on your side project casually. You don't have to make hard decisions quickly. You can stay comfortable in the planning phase forever. Even worse, you're giving mediocre performance to both your job and your potential business. You can't fully commit to your business because you need to keep your boss happy. You can't excel at your job because you're mentally distracted by your entrepreneurial dreams. You end up being average at two things, instead of extraordinary at one, the all-in advantage. Howard Schultz had a comfortable Xerox sales job with great benefits when he decided to join a tiny coffee company in Seattle. Advisors told him coffee was too risky and he should keep his guaranteed corporate income. He quit anyway to join what became Starbucks, eventually building it into a $100 billion plus company. Koum was making excellent money at Yahoo with stock options about to vest, guaranteed wealth. He quit to work on a simple messaging app that everyone thought was too basic. Facebook bought WhatsApp for $19 billion, the nuanced reality. But here's what's crucial to understand. These weren't reckless, impulsive decisions. These entrepreneurs had several factors working in their favor: deep industry knowledge and valuable connections, some validation of their concepts before making the leap. They'd calculated their worst-case scenarios and recovery plans. They had marketable skills that made them re-employable if needed, support systems and networks to fall back on, and clear vision of what success looked like. When might quitting make sense? You've validated significant market demand for your idea. Your side business is being seriously constrained by time limitations. You have high-demand skills that make re-employment feasible. You've saved enough to survive your realistic timeline. The opportunity cost of not focusing is enormous, and you have a specific, measurable definition of failure. What's keeping you at your day job right now? Security or genuine satisfaction? Drop your thoughts below. The failed billionaire's secret. Here's the moment that crystallized everything for me, and it comes from someone you've probably never heard of. A tech entrepreneur named Adam Neumann, who was worth $4.1 billion on paper before losing almost everything when WeWork collapsed. Neumann spoke at a small event after his spectacular failure, and he said something that completely reframed how I think about financial risk and success. He said, "Everyone focuses on how I lost billions, but they miss the real lesson. I went from being a broke college dropout to building a $47 billion company by breaking every traditional financial rule. Yes, I lost it all, but I also proved that ordinary people can build extraordinary things when they stop following advice designed to keep them ordinary." Then he said something that gave me chills. The biggest risk isn't losing money you have. It's never creating the money you could have had. Most people spend their entire lives managing small amounts of money very carefully instead of taking calculated risks to create large amounts of money they could manage however they want. This is what my father asked me that changed everything. He said, "Son, what's riskier, losing $10,000 you have or never making the million you could have earned?" That question completely shifted my perspective on what risk really means. Here's the real secret that billionaires understand. Wealth creation isn't about gambling or getting lucky. It's about deploying capital in areas where you have genuine advantages, knowledge, skills, connections, insights, or passion that others don't have. That's why concentration works for some people in some situations. They're not randomly picking stocks or starting businesses. They're concentrating in their areas of expertise and advantage. The ultra-wealthy think about money differently than middle-class people. They see money as a tool for creating opportunities, not just preserving security. They focus on asymmetric risk situations where potential upside far exceeds potential downside. The practical framework. If you're inspired to apply any of these concepts, here's a practical framework. Start with safety first. Build your basic financial foundation with traditional approaches. Identify your advantages. What do you know, understand, or have access to that others don't? Start small with amounts you can afford to lose completely. Validate assumptions by testing your ideas before making major commitments. Set clear failure criteria so you know exactly when to cut losses and pivot. Scale gradually by increasing commitments only after proving concepts work. Most importantly, for every success story I shared, there are thousands of failures. These strategies work for some people in some situations, but they're definitely not right for everyone. The goal isn't to abandon traditional financial wisdom. It's to understand when and why you might modify it based on your unique circumstances, goals, and advantages. Which of these myths hit you the hardest? Drop a comment and let me know if you're ready to challenge what everyone's told you about money, or if you're sticking with the tried and true approach. And if this video made you question everything you thought you knew about building wealth, hit that subscribe button because I'm dropping more financial truths every week that the industry doesn't want you hearing. Trust me, what's coming next will completely change how you see money forever.